Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Puja Modha. Puja is a commercial lawyer and compliance officer. She is also a partner at Aria Grace Law. Puja has a wealth of experience in compliance, operations, marketing, journalism, and corporate social responsibility. Puja is passionate about social mobility in the legal profession and inspiring the next generation. So, a very big warm welcome, Puja.
Thanks so much, Rob. I'm delighted to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to finally have you on the show. I'm so pleased we've managed to make it work. And before we go through all your amazing projects, experiences to date, we do have a little customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it?
Yes, I've seen all series, and I would say probably 6.5 on realness. Quite high, I know.
Puja, I think you must be one of the very few out of the hundreds and hundreds of guests we've had over the year who have done all the series. And to give it a 6.5, I'm very impressed that you've kind of gone through the journey with us on the show and also given a very reasonable 6.5. So would you mind by telling us a bit about your background and career journey?
Sure. So I graduated with a law degree in 2010 from Queen Mary. I then took a year out where I did work experience and internships in a variety of different types of organizations. This was then followed by specifically doing a vacation scheme at Citigroup, where I was there for 12 weeks. And then I worked at Citigroup for, I think, about 3.5 years in anti-money laundering, anti-bribery and corruption. I then moved over to Société Générale. I worked in their legal team. After that, I had to take a break as my mother got very sick and she was immobile. So I came home to look after her, and I was applying for training contracts, and I landed in a criminal defense and extradition law firm, and I worked there for 2 years, but I knew it wasn't necessarily the area I wanted to stay in. So I took some time out because, if I'm honest, I was exhausted of years of working and I wanted a break and to travel. And then I got a job as a legal counsel working for Smart Pension, which is a fintech company. And that's where I met someone called Lindsay Healy, who became my mentor and now is a very dear friend. I left Smart Pension and I worked then at a Japanese investment bank called MUFG. But I think my heart was tugging that I wanted to work in Aria Grace Law, which is the firm that my mentor and dear friend Lindsay created. And I've been at Aria Grace Law as a lawyer for now over 5 years.
And it's a phenomenal career. And I guess I want to go back a step to the why law for you. Why did you choose to pursue specifically the legal sector?
So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a lawyer. When I was about 7 years old, my grandfather passed away. And on his deathbed, before he died, he was forced to sign over a very successful business he had in East Africa. And in that process, he lost about 98% of his wealth completely gone. And I saw the impact that it had on my grandmother, my aunt, my mother. And it made me think, I want to do a job where I'm empowered. I also want to do a job where I can look after the people that I need to, with legal skills, with financial stability. And that's what triggered the desire of wanting to be a lawyer. And to be honest, I've been referred to as a dog with a bone. That was it. I wanted to be a lawyer and there was nothing else. And I'd been discouraged over the years through not being successful, let's say, in training contract processes and so on. But I was adamant that was what I was going to do. So that's what led me to this career path.
And I love your tenacity, but I also admire your values. And, slightly similar in some respects, my wife wanting to be involved in the legal community and podcasting stems from my grandfather, because he was a lawyer and he left a sort of wonderful legacy in an offline world. And I'm obviously trying to emulate that in an online world and use all of these wonderful new things like podcasts. He'll be thinking, what on earth was that back in his day? But I really like that you're, fighting for justice. And, there's a reason for that. And that's gone on to be a profession, and it's based on really fundamentally great values and, your whole work ethic and motivation and tenacity, and obviously clearly success from what you've achieved behind that. So really like that story. Thank you for sharing. Let's talk a little bit more then about sort of, you're a commercial lawyer, compliance officer, partner at Aria Grace Law. For those who might be less familiar, what is a compliance officer?
Okay, so Lawyers and compliance officers work together. There are similarities, but a compliance officer is looking specifically at the legal requirements and how you can comply with those requirements from a practical, from an operational sense. So let's say there are money laundering regulations as an example. That's the regulation, that's the law that we have to follow. But you have to have policies, procedures in place in your business to comply. And that's part of what the compliance officer does. They also do things like day-to-day interaction with regulators. So I have engaged with regulators in the financial sector, in data privacy, certainly over the years. So that's very much on the compliance side. The lawyer, on the other hand, may, let's say, do more contentious things or things which have a more commercial angle, like drafting terms and conditions, which is not something a compliance officer or consultant would do.
I love that. Such a great example and just concise and easy to digest. So, really appreciate you taking the time to go through both of those. Can we talk about what a typical day looks like for you then? Because I can imagine it's quite varied. Talk us through a day in the life of Puja.
Okay, so I wake up at about 5 to 6 a.m. I live with a chronic medical condition and an injury with my leg, so I do about 90 minutes of physio. I then go to the gym, I do Zumba, I do body combat, then I do some stretching, yoga, then I come home. I actually start working around lunchtime, actually, and I can do that because of the Aria Grace Law model that I'm in. I can choose the hours as to when I want to work and how. 12 o'clock, I have lunch. I look at all my emails, manage client expectations, start doing a bit of work. Around 2 o'clock to 7 o'clock, I'm in meetings with clients. And then 7 to 10, I actually do a lot of my legal work when it's a lot quieter and I don't have constant pings of clients messaging me or the need to actually supervise my trainee as well, because I know, thankfully, she's having a well-deserved break in the late evening while I'm there working.
What I love about that is, number one, your core pillar is obviously health. You look after, you make sure that, Zumba, I love that. And, everything that you're doing, because I was listening to obviously Diary of CEO. Everyone's heard of the podcast called Stephen Bartlett. And he was saying the number one pillar for him is health, right? So if you can get that right, then business, relationships, everything from there can go forward. And I love, and that's why it's important that people know about law firms like Aria Grace Law that exist, that can give you this autonomy, flexibility to work, when suits you and is right for you and what you're trying to do. And, I'm similar to you, I'm not a morning person. I don't really get going until sort of, 11s is plus, but I'm very, in the evening when things die down, my little one's in bed, I've done bath time. 7, 8 p.m. I kick in, I just get these thoughts, I get these ideas, I go back to clients, I really go for it. So I absolutely relate to that. So let's talk about some of the articles you've been involved with. In your article with Medium, Aria Grace Law, how a unique ethical firm has been able to help startups during COVID-19. You state, the Aria Law model is based on sharing values in which it treats clients, lawyers, and society within one ecosystem, where if one does well, every other party in the ecosystem does well. Love that. So would you mind explaining how this ecosystem functions in practical terms?
Yes, of course. I'd be excited to. So for lawyers, firstly, in comparison to a traditional law firm where, let's say, I would be charged at a certain rate and the partnership, the equity, would take a chunk of what I'm being charged out to the client, and I get a very small amount as my employee salary. In Aria Grace Law, whatever I charge out to the clients, I get 90% of that hourly rate. So simple math, as an example, let's say the charge out rate's £100. Out of that £100 per hour that I'm working, I take away £90. That is huge, and it's unprecedented in the legal sector to be in a position to have a platform or an organization that allows you to do that. Now, by earning so well, that also means that I don't have to work as many hours so excessively. So I can do things like look after my health, spend that whole morning until 12 lunchtime exercising, doing things I enjoy. So I'm a happier lawyer. This also then affects clients because they're getting a lawyer who's had experience in large organizations, in private practice, in-house, and can advise them and support them and is in a better mindset. That also means that also their prices are better because we don't have expensive overheads. We're virtual. I think our registered office at one point was Lindsay's home address has been changed now to another location, but we don't have a physical presence. So you're not going to be being, the client isn't going to be charged for my fancy office in, let's say, Canary Wharf, and all my expensive dinners and the corporate hospitality events I'm doing. They're not going to have that cost. So the client benefits. There's also a feel-good factor for the client in that 10% of everything that is charged to them is in some shape or form we either use in the firm for our overheads, which are very low, or the rest, which is the profits, go directly to charity. So it's great for a client to know, actually, I'm engaging with you, you're earning properly. It's not going to some executive sitting in a fancy office. It's actually going to the person who's doing all the hard work that I like, who's happy to see me, and I'm happy to see them. And part of what I'm paying you is going to a charity, sometimes a charity that they choose or care about, and they endorse and tell us, please, would you give it to this organization or this worthy cause? So that's where the the society element comes in the ecosystem. Everybody benefits in some shape or form through this model that Lindsay created about 6 years ago.
So prior to joining Aria Grace Law, you were pro bono counsel, I believe, at Q Legal. So what was your experience of providing free legal advice, workshops, online resources to startups and entrepreneurs?
I've supported Q Legal while being a partner at Aria Grace Law. So it wasn't necessarily beforehand, but I did have a relationship with them because I went to Queen Mary University of London, and while I was there, they had a pro bono clinic, which Q Legal was essentially it. So many years later, I wanted to give back, and I wanted to help other students who are trying to do pro bono work and spending their spare time in a really valuable, good way for the community. So while working at Aria Grace Law, obviously I'm really fortunate. I choose my hours, I get remunerated really well. So I thought, let me get involved with Q Legal. So what I was doing is the students, for example, would meet with a startup. They'd come up with some advice. They'd send it to me. I would review it. I would give them feedback. I'd get them to change things because obviously I have more experience and I'm a commercial lawyer. So I will see things that they may not necessarily have thought of commercially. So I would give them feedback on their work, and then they would revise, update, and then off it goes to the startup. And I think there were 2 startups that we helped together. Separately, sometimes if they did some types of legal notes that they wanted to publish online to help the startup community via their LinkedIn page, they would send it to me and I'd give them some advice and feedback if it wasn't, let's say, an area that I know really well.
I love that. You're such a sort of caring, supportive individual, and you have so many strings to your bow, which I also really kind of appreciate. So what about going back to your city days, just to give people a bit more education, because you're an EMEA anti-money laundering, which you touched on before, regulatory and policy lead there. What were you involved in? Give people an idea of what it was like in that sort of financial services environment, in that type of role.
It was a fascinating experience for which I am and will always be grateful to Citigroup for. If I'm honest, I think there were parts of me that didn't appreciate the experience as much as I could have at the time because I was so gunning to be a lawyer. And with hindsight, I wish I could have seen, actually, Puja, the experience you're getting in a compliance function is phenomenal. This is actually what's helped me become a better lawyer, is having that compliance experience. But if I contrast working at Citigroup to my lifestyle now and where I've landed with Aria Grace Law, the hours were a lot more extreme. One has to be a lot more politically savvy to navigate in that sort of an organization, and in multiple types of banks and large law firms. And it can be tiring, if I'm honest, having to be so politically savvy. They even had a course on how to be more politically savvy that I went on. It was something that was quite common that you needed to further develop. I gained great experience, but it's not something I would ever want to do or go back in, because I think with organizations like that bank and several other banks, they're very big and it's very hard to move projects and things forward. It's also very hard to change certain cultural and institutional thinking, such as on things like nepotism. There are 3 law firms and 1 bank that I can recall off the top of my head where nepotism was rife, and I'm not one of the beneficiary of it. So I've had a very different experience, and it can really affect you, your career, how you operate, how you think. And appreciate the experience I gained, work experience and my career development in those organizations, but I'm very, very happy where I've landed because we live and breathe integrity in how we work, how we hire, how we transfer people within the firm into other clients or teams. It is all about fairness. And I didn't see that a lot in my career, sadly.
No, and I appreciate you giving a refreshingly, authentic, response to that, and also picking out the experience. Because I say in any scenario that you're in, there are lessons you will learn or education you will get, and it's how you take that experience as a building block to sort of be the master of your own career. Because I always use this a quote time and time again in every episode. I think if it's meant to be, it's up to me. I think we're very good at pointing the finger, and actually, if you look back, there's more fingers pointing back at you. So if you're in the environment that doesn't serve you or is not right for you, it's up to you to go and find elsewhere. Because if you rely on other people and don't take that self-accountability, that's when you can get into negative mindsets and get into negative group thinking, and actually it can kind of send you backwards. So I love that you kind of pick up on the positives and how you pushed your career further. You're in an environment that you're flourishing that's around your core values because you've made that happen. So I absolutely tip my hat to you with that. Let's talk about journalism, because you wear a few hats and have worn some hats. So you also spent some time working as a journalist. What skills, I can imagine there's quite a few that you picked up along the way that you now use as a lawyer from your time as a journalist?
So I worked for a travel company in Singapore called Trip 101. I was virtual, and I would write travel articles in my own name. I would also copyright in the name of other organizations on behalf of them. Some of my work was, for example, linked with Booking.com, which is one of their partners. And the key thing I learned from the editors when I first started out was I thought I was really good, but I really wasn't. Being from a legal type of background, we don't know adjectives. We're quite matter of fact. And the key thing they said to me is if you want to try and promote and sell a resort or a restaurant, you can't say things like, the food tasted really nice. It's got to have a lot more, the food tantalized my palate. It was a riveting experience eating and dining in this luxury establishment. It can't just be, I really liked eating there and it was nice ambience. So I learned a lot more about how to actually use more adjectives and add a bit more of a personality flair. And how this has helped me as a lawyer is often my clients need me to draft documents that are on their website, like privacy notice, terms of use, or employment contracts, for example, or consultancy agreements internally. And whenever I'm drafting content for them, I say to them, do you have any brand guidelines? Do you have any copyright, description of how the style in which you write? I will write in your style because then it seems more authentic and it's more real. I don't just want to draft you a very simple standard document. Let's make this fun. This is your business. Let's show people who you are through your legal documents. You'll have all the right clauses and it will be credible and it will protect you. But we want to show your personality. The law doesn't have to be boring. We can make it fun.
We can make it fun. And we talk about that on the show, and we say to every guest, everyone listening, we hope you get education, inspiration, but also have fun, either being a guest on the show or being part of the show or supporting the show. Okay, we're going to talk now about a topic that I know you're passionate about, because throughout your career, including 2 internships, you've experienced the wrath of nepotism early on. So at what moments did you realize nepotism was present within your workplaces?
So I learned really, really early on, I would say about 14 years ago, that nepotism was prevalent in various organizations that I had worked in or got an internship. I think the first time was there was a law firm that had partnered with a legal advice clinic that I was volunteering in. And that law firm had said, look, we're going to offer 2 candidates a place on an internship in summer. During the academic year, though, we're going to assess your performance. And we're also going to put you on an assessment day where you're going to be assessed through the day. And we're going to decide the right 2 candidates who we'd like on the internship. I was so excited, Rob. I was like, wow, this is like my dream law firm. Because one of the areas of law they did was something I wanted to learn more about, which was immigration law, because of my family in Kenya. And I thought, wow, I'm going to do my absolute best. And I actually got told, right, you're in the top 2. We're going to offer you an internship. And I burst into tears when I was home. I was so happy. And I arrived on my first day and I was in a room with all the other candidates. I was so thrilled. And then I realized they were all talking, they were quite relaxed and a lot of slang, and they didn't seem like it was a very professional environment, if I'm honest. And I thought, wow, maybe I'm just a bit uptight, to be honest. And it transpired quite quickly that they were 16 to 18-year-olds. I was the only 21-year-old in there who was just finished her third year at university. So maybe it was school leavers that they were helping or something like that. But as the day went on, I realized that they were partners' children. And this was their summer work experience placement. And you know what? That's fine. If you want to put your kids on a placement, if you've worked hard to build your career, you want them to get an insight. But what I would say to organizations is please don't put somebody like me who's had to jump through hoops to get there. That creates unfairness, inequality, and it completely reinforces the disparities in wealth and background. And it was hard hitting home. But if I'm honest, I was still a little bit like, you know what, I'm so grateful to be here. It doesn't matter. And it's true, I still hold the gratitude, but it was not okay that they were there at that same time. It was unfair in how it was done. But that was the beginning. There was a lot more on that journey that happened.
Exactly, but it's important that you highlight that example, and yeah, thank you again for giving that insight.
Hey Legal Eagles, before we dive back in today's episode of the Legally Speaking podcast, here's a quick message from our sponsor Cilo, the cloud-based legal software making solicitors' lives easier. Clio's powerful automation features simplify your work, saving you time on billing, document management, and client communications. Automate repetitive tasks, streamline client intake and onboarding, and keep everything organized all in one place. Enjoy flexible pricing plans starting from just £49 per user per month. Curious about the data migration from your existing provider? Clio's experts will take care of everything, ensuring a smooth and seamless transition with limited downtime for your firm. Ready to see how Cilo can help your firm maximize efficiency and increase your revenue? Book a free product walkthrough today at clio.com/UK. Now back to the show.
So let's go a little bit deeper then. In what ways do you believe nepotism affects social mobility within the legal profession? And what can law firms be doing to reduce the influence of nepotism in law firms and indeed other legal institutions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's trying to figure out now what we can do, knowing that it is a problem. I think nepotism really undermines the principles of meritocracy, and then that affects how individuals who haven't benefited from nepotism operate, their motivation levels, their self-worth and happiness in their organization. If they see nepotism as prevalent, it starts creating a bit of a toxic workplace because people realize actually perpetuates inequality by limiting opportunities to people because they know, right, however hard I try, this person who's the director's son, niece, cousin, next door neighbor is going to benefit more. So it can have a huge impact negatively on social mobility because it's very much favoring the privileged, and it's showing people that if you don't have the same network and same connections, you can't get to the same level. So it is a huge, and I think it's a serious problem that needs to be addressed, and it would take time. I think there are things that law firms can do, but also people who are facing nepotism can do. So with law firms, what I would say is there needs to be clear and transparent hiring processes for job transfers and for promotions. Because if there is a clear process, it can help. One where there's checks and balances to ensure it goes through. So, for example, in my career, I wanted to move departments in one organization. And I was told, keep an eye out on internal vacancies on our portal. That's where we advertise all jobs. If there's no one suitable internally, we look externally. Sounds like a good process, makes sense. So every day I was checking and there wasn't a vacancy. And a couple of weeks later, suddenly a director's son decides to get a fixed term contract in that exact department. He is male and of a different background. I am female and I'm Asian. And I have more legal qualifications and experience than him. So it didn't add up. How did he get that role? There was no internal mention of the vacancy, no external publicity. And I had a good rapport with the HR manager covering all the departments. And I asked her, what happened? I don't understand. Did I miss something? And she said to me, no, I have no idea how that individual landed in this role. Shall I start investigating because there is a problem here? And if I'm honest, Rob, I said to her, no, because I thought, what is her investigating going to do for me in that position? It's not going to get me that role. It's going to make me look like a troublemaker. It's going to cause more hostility and problems for me, including that person's father, who was a director in the function I was in. I was trapped. I was a junior professional with limited resources and access to help. So I really think, though, that there needs to be clear processes. There needs to be checks and balances. There also needs to be a safe mechanism for someone like me to escalate. So a whistleblowing process and policy around this topic where I don't necessarily face the repercussions if I report it or say, yes, please investigate, because it doesn't come back to me, the person who's, let's say, the victim of nepotism. So I think there needs to be processes and whistleblowing, but tying into that, training and education, because we can't blame people if they don't know. You can't say, oh, you can't have your child or get your nephew that job if people don't realize that it's a problem. On the one hand, you could tug at people's heartstrings in training and say social mobility, doing the right thing. And if that doesn't work, let's tug at reputational damage for the business, outcry from public, lack of trust and integrity. That might work to help people to understand we can't do this. It's not right. Or if we are going to do it, let's do a separate program or placement if it's work experience for family and friends, and then do one which is a properly recruited process for people who applied and went through a criteria. So there's that separation and creates that right balance to keep everybody happy. So that's what I would say I think organizations need to do, but there's also things people like me can do to combat it, because it can't always be, like you said, we can't just blame and point the finger one way. We've got to point the finger back. What can I do? What I did, and I would recommend other people do, is networking. LinkedIn is fabulous, as you yourself know, Rob.
Yes, indeed, I do.
Networking is fantastic. Use LinkedIn. Develop relationships with people. Go to events. You can find mentors. You can find people who were from disadvantaged backgrounds who are willing to help you and are in a position of power where they can guide you with your career, possibly even give you work experience. I am so blessed that I, through networking, had developed two mentors who both gave me work experience. One was in a technology company and one was in a law firm. And they too had had their own struggles and background problems with their career. So there are people out there who'll help you. If your mom and dad isn't a lawyer, there are many other lawyers in the world. Go and make some connections. And then I think if you are already in an organization, build alliances, advocates, people who will sponsor you. They can combat a bit of nepotism. So I was fortunate in some places I worked where I had mentors internally who would advocate for me, and that would help a little bit, not entirely, but it still helped, and it helped my motivation level and feeling supported. So have the advocates and alliances around you. Work hard, do what's in your control. Know you're going to have to work harder, but do it, and then remember that there are other opportunities outside. Go and find your opportunity. Like how I found Aria Grace Law. It exists. You can join a place that fits in with your ethos and what you believe if you can't find it elsewhere.
Exactly. Don't settle for being dissatisfied, right? And I think you're a fantastic example of giving some great tips, practical advice for people. But there's lots of things in that, segment you just gave. Try to control the controllables, like you said. We talk about this on the show. Mentors matter. They can really provide growth opportunities. They can shortcut issues. They've been there, they've done that. They can provide guidance. They can provide that support. And, particularly for me as a legal community builder, it's so important to have mentors and people around you, particularly when you're trying to grow something, because you'll come across challenges, and everyone comes across challenges, and it's just this thing called life. And you've got to see how you can navigate your own journey. And I always say, and you hit the nail on the head when it comes to networking, NSN, never stop networking. I really strongly believe it's the number one thing we should all be doing, because you're only one relationship away from changing your life. Like, I fundamentally believe that. It could be that mentor. It could be that next partner of the law firm that hires you. It could be that next business partner. It could be a personal relationship that, again, we know that making sure you make good decisions in your personal life really can impact your professional life. So networking is so important. So I'm a huge advocate for that, and LinkedIn, everything you just said. So thank you for for sharing that. Okay, let's talk a bit more broader in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In your opinion, what initiatives can law firms implement to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion within them?
So I think the work experience placement is one, especially students who are at high school. So, let's say sixth form, and they have to have a 1 week work experience placement. Partnering with those schools in certain communities could be a really great idea in helping to allow for more inclusion, especially at an earlier age, rather than, let's say, waiting till someone's at university. So helping school students through work experience. Another thing would be mentoring, would actually, I think, be key. I've benefited hugely from amazing mentors, and that can be at any stage, but also having mentors of different types. So I mentor a lot of people, especially some junior lawyers at the moment. And I actually say to them, it's great you've got me as a mentor, but now get a mentor who's, let's say, a trainee solicitor. Get a mentor who's been a paralegal for 5 years. Get a mentor of someone who works in the operations function, because you are going to learn so much from people of different levels in hierarchy of, let's say, a law firm, and different functions, because that can help you understand how these organizations operate, and that allows for better inclusion when you do actually land up working in those places. So I think for organizations, it's key is doing work experience placement, but also offering mentors who are not necessarily just mentors who are, in this case, lawyers. It can be the whole spectrum of an organization we can learn from.
Yeah, and you're basically building your own set of personal board of advisors. And I always talk about 360 mentoring, people beneath you, above you, to the side of you, around you, giving you that full shape view, so you can make your own informed decisions. So really appreciate you giving your reflections on that as well, and some of the benefits that it could lead to for people with their legal careers. Let's talk about some traits, because, how have your personal experiences been with resilience, rejection, nepotism, ultimately shaped your perception of the current legal sector?
I would say it's a highly competitive sector. Nepotism does play a part in, let's say, getting a paralegal role, getting a training contract, becoming an associate partner, and so on. I don't think it's the only thing that affects people. There are lots of other factors, obviously. What I would say is that you have to be very resilient to cope with the rejection in how you process it and continue. Legal sector being competitive means you are going to have to be quite thick-skinned. I think there was a 4-year period where I'd applied to over 500 places and I had received rejections. Sometimes it was just straight out no. I think I got one rejection in less than half an hour, which was like a record. To getting to final rounds after assessment days, interviews, and to go, nope, not the right candidate. And it can really affect you. The way that I have coped and would actually recommend to other people is exercise. I found that exercise helped me a lot. So I do Zumba. I'm a Zumba instructor. I do body combat 4 times a week. It helps me get those endorphins, which builds that shield to protect from the negativity. Because even if, let's say, you do get that job, that training contract, or that associate role, you're still going to get negativity. Your supervisor will be negative with feedback, sometimes constructive, sometimes mean. You're going to have clients sometimes not be very nice to you because they're stressed out, or they just feel it's their right to be unpleasant. You have to be able to combat that rejection and negativity, and prioritizing your health and things like exercise and even meditation can be hugely beneficial in coping through not just the journey of becoming a lawyer, but actually being a lawyer and practicing the law.
Really well said. And, again, I talk about this a lot on the show. Rejection is just redirection. And I think, if you can redirect that sort of rejection into doing something positive and try and surround yourself around people, I think that's really, really important. Everything is energy. I think you've given some really practical, tactical advice around that, particularly people who might be facing some rejections. And I always say as well, you never lose. I use the acronym, it's life offering some experience. So try to get some feedback from that rejection where possible. call, or maybe get some objective. If you can't get the feedback, get someone, maybe a mentor, to provide you feedback on how you maybe could improve for the next time. Because, Einstein, people have got it right. The definition of doing the same thing time and time and time again and getting the same result, you need to look, okay, what can we change and improve to move forward? And the only other thing I would say to people, obviously I'm biased, but I would say a huge game changer, which lots of people overlook, is building a relationship with a legal recruiter from the start of your career to the end. I think it's one of the best relationships you can have that can give you a really good insights into the market opportunities on top of your own individual networking. But if you're not in a role currently, or you're trying to get into an opportunity at the early stage of the career, treat it almost as your job. And you and I all know, Puja, you get knockbacks during your working day. You'll have certain knockbacks. So celebrate the things that go well throughout that week. Celebrate, give yourself some positive energy if you've made that application. Go for that 10, 15-minute walk and grab a coffee and reward yourself, and create those little wins into your day that actually give you good energy, and don't just dwell on the rejection. So I think this has been an absolute masterclass start to finish. I want to ask one question, which to me is a very clear question throughout this discussion, that the way that you use a certain hashtag, but I'm asked the question anyway. You're described as more than just a lawyer. So what's your meaning behind this?
So that means, while I am a lawyer, I can do so much more for my clients and the community that I support and work with. So, for example, I told you I was a travel journalist and copywriter. I'm a compliance consultant, which, as we know, is different to what a lawyer is. That's another area. For Aria Grace Law, I, with Lindsay for several years, until we got a fab team right now, was doing all the operations and marketing internally. And so through that, I learned a lot about different systems. I learned about algorithms, like on LinkedIn, for example, for marketing purposes. And that means that when clients, let's say, instruct me, I can think about things not just through a legal and commercial lens. I can think operationally. And more, if they want a bit of fun, or they want to celebrate when we've done some big deal, we can do Zumba, because I am a Zumba instructor, and that makes it fun. So that is what I mean by I'm more than just a lawyer. I can offer you a full suite of services and advice, and also dance at the end with you so we can have some fun.
And that is a unique selling point. And I want to do some Zumba now. I'm sold. Like, I'm sat here like getting ready to get up and do some dancing. So absolutely love that. Okay, one final question before we let you go. What would be your one piece of advice for those starting their legal careers, be that graduating or looking for their first legal job?
Mm-hmm. I would say, while it's important to gain legal experience, gain non-legal experience as well. This is because then you can understand how law firms, let's say, operate. If you're in a corporate social responsibility department, something I've done as well, or if you're in operations or business development department, you can learn more about how that organization operates. What's important are the support functions in it. But also, when you're engaging with clients, they love to know if you can understand how they operate, how a revenue team, how a sales team operates is key, because often you're writing contracts for that sales team to push out. So if you know how they think and their mindset, that can be hugely beneficial. So gain experience, not just in law, but outside of the let's say, legal type role.
I love that. It's a really good example. And it's almost like you're then better equipped to meet your clients where they're at in terms of their understandings. And, you've got good quality transferable skills and something different, because if everyone's just paying attention to just getting core legal experience right from the start, that gives you a slightly different string to your bow, that actually you've got some legal experience, but this experience in this combination, and articulating that value to the law firm or the next employer is hopefully going to make you shine. Love, love, love that. Okay. So Puja, if our listeners, which I'm sure they will, want to know more about your career journey, Aria Grace, what you've got going on, where can they find out more? Feel free to shout out any social media handles, website links. We'll also make sure we share them with this special episode for you too.
Oh, cool. That is awesome. Best place to get hold of me is actually LinkedIn. I live on it pretty much all day. So please follow, connect, send me a message. I would love to chat with anyone who's in your community and wants to know more or discuss any of these topics as well.
I'm sure they will. Well, it just leads me to say thank you so much, Puja. It's been an absolute pleasure getting you on the Legally Speaking podcast. Wishing you lots of continued success for now and the future. But from all of us, over and out.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.